In the aftermath of the war, the king had no choice but to surrender unconditionally. At the peace summit, the victors handed the king a shovel. "You started this war. You will bury those who died in it." At first, the king felt angry. He had lost the war, and thus, he expected that there would be reparations to pay. But this? This was just humiliation. How could they make a royal, and a king at that, do such menial work? But he had no other choice. As such, he passed the crown to his son and departed for the lands where the war had been fought. The sight there was not one he was used to. Thousands of dead, laying on the bare land, with the pungent smell of death filling his nostrils. "How will I ever finish this?" he thought. Most of the bodies would probably decompose before he'd even get to them. Regardless of such thoughts, he had to do it. That was the agreement after all. The victors would spare them under the condition that the king would bury the fallen himself. And people were watching him to make sure that he would comply to the terms. While the sun was out, he would dig graves, and before sleeping he would eat and drink whatever the guards gave him. He didn't care much for those he buried. If anything, he resented them. After all, had they been stronger and not died, the former king would still be enjoying his life in the palace. One day, on a whim, he decided to remove the helmet of one of those he was about to bury. It was just an impulse, to see what the warrior that died for him looked like. And although the warrior's face had already started to decompose, he could see it. A child? His blood ran cold. The one in front of him looked to have been no more than 20 years old. This can't be. The former king thought that he must have been seeing it wrong due to being tired and famished, and buried the young warrior, but the thought remained in his mind, and he started removing the helmets of all the soldiers before burying them. God. Women. Children. Elderly. As much as the man wanted to deny it, it was clear. His kingdom had never been ready for war. To consolidate the losing army, ordinary people had been conscripted into the war. People with families and loved ones. Those that were too young to ruthlessly kill an enemy. Those who were too scared to focus on what was in front of them. And those who were too weak to protect the young and scared ones. What have I done? Alas, it was now too late to regret it. The tears streaming down his face would not bring them back, nor would his desperate screams. Even if he realized it now, what could he do? He wanted to gouge his own eyes out, to tear himself from limb to limb. But he could not. That would not be atonement, not in the slightest. "I will remember everyone. Even those whose faces I won't get to see. I will remember you." And thus, he kept digging graves. He would remove the helmet of every man and woman he would bury, if only to keep them in his memory. He no longer whined about the poor food he received, nor about the pain of sleeping on the ground or in the cold. Even after years passed and there was no longer any resemblance between the dead ones and their alive selves, he would still do it all the same. And as the last grave was finished, the old man sighed in relief, before becoming the last one to fall on that field.